Karoline Leavitt was never one to back down from a challenge. At just 26, she had already made waves in conservative circles as a former Trump White House staffer and one of the youngest GOP congressional candidates in history. But what happened recently wasn't part of any political campaign. It was personal. And it was a perfect storm of politics, power, and poetic justice. Karoline Leavitt had been working with a major media organization known for its subtle liberal slant. She didn't hide her conservative beliefs, she never does, but she did her job professionally, always. But there was tension. The manager she worked under, a proud liberal with a history of political activism and a chip on her shoulder, didn't exactly appreciate Karoline's unapologetic patriotism, her pro-Trump rhetoric, or her growing popularity online. What started as side-eyes and passive-aggressive emails turned into constant micromanagement. Karoline was being assigned to stories that didn't align with her expertise, while others with less experience were getting higher-profile assignments. Still, Karoline kept her head high. She wasn't new to bias. She had lived through worse. Then came the final straw. During a team meeting, Karoline spoke up about a coverage angle that she felt was unfairly skewed against conservative voices. She was respectful, clear, and concise. But her manager, visibly irritated, dismissed her viewpoint in front of the entire team. A few days later, Karoline was called into HR. The reason? Not aligning with the company's values. No violations, no warnings, just that. It didn't take long for the conservative media world to light up with the news. The narrative was clear. Karoline Leavitt, a strong conservative female voice, had been fired not for doing anything wrong, but for standing up for what she believed in, for being who she is. But here's where the story takes a dramatic twist. The Karoline. Very next day, as former co-workers whispered and texted in group chats about the abrupt dismissal, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the front entrance of the building. Heads turned. Some thought it was a celebrity visit. Others assumed it was some high-level exec arriving in style, but no one expected what happened next. Karoline Leavitt stepped out of the Rolls-Royce like a scene straight from a movie. Graceful, confident, and wearing the same signature smile that had once made her a viral sensation at the White House press podium. She wasn't there for drama. She was there for clarity. Because the driver of that Rolls, that was her husband. Turns out the man behind the wheel was not just a successful businessman. He was one of the rising stars in the finance world. Silent, powerful, and very well connected. Rumor has it that he had just finalized a deal that put him on the radar of every major player on Wall Street. And when he heard about Karoline's firing, he didn't fume online or rant in interviews. He simply said, "Let's go." He wanted the entire office, especially that manager, to see what real strength looks like. Karoline didn't say a word to anyone that day. She walked past the front desk, nodded to a couple of former colleagues, and left behind a letter. Not of resignation, she had already been let go, but a message. A note that reportedly said, "Thank you for making the decision for me. I've got bigger things to build. See you at the top." The liberal manager, the one who orchestrated her firing, she didn't even show up to the office that day. According to sources inside the company, she was working from home and later went on an unexpected 2-week vacation. Some say it was burnout. Others believe she realized the backlash her decision had sparked, not just from conservative media, but from inside the company. Because whether people agreed with Karoline politically or not, many respected her professionalism, her work ethic, and her unwillingness to be silenced. The story spread like wildfire. Conservative influencers praised Karoline as a symbol of resilience. She did interviews, not to complain, but to emphasize the importance of staying true to your values. She said, "No one should be afraid to speak up in the workplace, especially when all you're doing is standing up for fairness." And as for the Rolls-Royce moment, it became a meme, a TikTok trend, and eventually a symbol of what happens when people try to cancel someone who can't be canceled. What's Karoline doing now? She's in talks to launch her own media company, aimed at giving conservative voices a platform without fear of retaliation. She's also collaborating on a book deal, and insiders say it's going to be a raw, behind-the-scenes look at working in both politics and media. The story didn't end at the curb of that office building. In fact, that moment was only the beginning. In the weeks that followed, Karoline's profile skyrocketed. Conservative outlets invited her for exclusive interviews, while podcasts, online shows, and even a few mainstream networks couldn't resist the drama and power of the story. It was more than just office politics. It was about standing up against a growing culture of ideological conformity. Karoline didn't waste time. She launched a video on social media titled "Fired for Thinking Differently," and within 24 hours, it racked up over 5 million views. No screaming, no insults, just her, calmly explaining what happened, how it made her feel, and why she believes it's a wake-up call for professionals across the country. People resonated with it. Not just conservatives, but moderates, centrists, and even some on the left who had grown tired of the increasingly rigid expectations in corporate America. In her words, this wasn't about politics. It was about principle. It was about the right to think, speak, and work freely, without fear of losing your livelihood. Meanwhile, the media company where she worked found itself under unexpected scrutiny. Emails leaked, conversations surfaced. And though no official statement was released, the sudden review of internal diversity practices made one thing very clear. They knew they messed up. Big time. As her story circulated, more employees from across the industry reached out, privately sharing similar experiences of being sidelined or punished for holding views outside the mainstream narrative. Karoline began compiling those stories. She didn't just want to highlight her own experience, she wanted to give others a voice. And that's when the idea for her new project was born. She announced it in a post that broke the internet. "I'm building something. For everyone who's ever been silenced, sidelined, or shamed for standing up. We're not just pushing back. We're building forward." The platform, tentatively named Independent Lane, aims to be a digital hub for commentary, reporting, and cultural conversations without political gatekeeping. Not just another conservative outlet, but a place where heterodox thinkers can speak freely and where stories like hers won't just survive, they'll thrive. Investors? Already lined up. Tech talent? Pouring in. The same manager who fired her. Silent. And as if the universe was putting an exclamation point on the entire saga, Karoline was invited to speak at a national summit on workplace freedom and open discourse. Her keynote, standing room only. She ended it with a mic drop moment. "They tried to cancel my voice, but they just made it louder." Back at home, her husband, the same one who pulled up in the Rolls-Royce, has been her quiet but unwavering rock. No flashy statements, no public tweets. Just a quiet power move that reminded everyone. Sometimes the best response isn't noise, it's presence. What's next for Karoline? There are rumors of a return to politics. Some say she's being encouraged to run again, this time with national-level backing. Others think she might hold off and keep building her media empire first. Either way, one thing is clear. She's not going anywhere. She didn't let a biased manager define her worth. She didn't let a corporation bury her message. She didn't crumble under pressure. She rose. And now, every time someone hears the story of the girl who got fired for thinking differently and who drove away in a Rolls-Royce with the future, wide open, they don't just remember Karoline Leavitt. They remember what happens when you stay true to yourself in a world that tries to silence you. You don't just survive, you win. The momentum didn't slow down. Within just 2 months of being fired, Karoline Leavitt had gone from a media employee quietly doing her job to a national symbol of fearless conviction. And people took notice. Not just online, but in boardrooms, newsrooms, and political war rooms across the country. Her new platform, Independent Lane, went live with a bang. The launch stream featured a mix of former journalists, entrepreneurs, creators, and even whistleblowers. People who had been burned by the same system that tried to take her down. The platform wasn't just conservative, it was wide open. a space for real debate, civil disagreement, and most of all, courage. It was a rejection of cancel culture, of censorship, of intellectual cowardice. And Karoline? She was the face of it all. She hosted a weekly show called Unfiltered Lane, a raw, honest segment where she interviewed thought leaders and regular people with extraordinary stories. Each episode opened with the same line: "You don't have to agree with me, but I won't be silent." The audience ate it up. Corporate advertisers started taking interest, which brought its own controversy. Several big brands reached out wanting to collaborate, then pulled back after facing backlash from activist groups. But Karoline wasn't fazed. She responded with a post that went viral. "If standing for free speech costs me sponsors, I'll still stand." That post alone gained over 12 million views on X, formerly Twitter. But this wasn't just about media anymore. Whispers started growing louder in Washington. Political insiders began floating the idea that Karoline could become the future of conservative leadership, young, sharp, media-savvy, and completely unfazed by the left-wing machine. Party strategists were watching, donors were calling, pollsters started testing her name in hypothetical races. Then came the rally. It was meant to be a small gathering in New Hampshire, just a local event to support independent voices in journalism. But what started as a 300-person RSVP turned into 3,000. By the time Karoline stepped on stage, the parking lot was overflowing. The crowd was chanting her name, and the media, ironically, was forced to cover it. She gave a speech that was equal parts passionate and surgical. They fired me to prove a point, but they ended up proving mine. They thought I would disappear. Instead, I got louder. They thought I would back down. Instead, I built something. This isn't just about me. This is about every American who's ever been told to sit down and shut up. I've got news for them. We're just getting started. The clip of that speech hit every major conservative outlet within hours. Fox News, Newsmax, The Daily Wire, even some international platforms in Europe picked it up. She wasn't just trending. She was leading a movement. Back at her old job, the silence was deafening. The liberal manager who had fired her still hadn't returned to the office full-time. According to a leaked memo, she had transitioned to a remote role to focus on strategic development. Translation: she was quietly being pushed aside. Meanwhile, Karoline and her husband, who still hadn't said a word to the press, became somewhat of a power couple online. Every time they were spotted together, it turned into headlines. Not because of scandal, but because of strength. People were inspired by them, especially young women who saw in Karoline a blueprint, integrity, grit, and grace under pressure. And then, on the 6-month anniversary of her firing, Karoline made another announcement. She was launching a PAC. The mission? Support candidates who value free speech, media transparency, and American values, regardless of party affiliation. Her goal wasn't to create an echo chamber, it was to challenge the status quo. Fund new voices. Support those who refuse to bend the knee. The PAC's name? Uncancelled. Donations poured in. Within 72 hours, it had raised over $1 million. It was no longer just a comeback. It was a revolution. And as for the Rolls-Royce, it became more than a car. It became a symbol, a meme, a metaphor for how Karoline Leavitt didn't just survive being fired, she turned it into fuel. Every article that tried to smear her, every anonymous source, every fake headline. She didn't retaliate. She leveled up. Her story wasn't just one of vindication. It was a masterclass in turning rejection into rocket fuel. In a world where most people fear being canceled, Karoline showed what happens when you embrace the storm and rise above it. Because at the end of the day, she didn't need permission. She had purpose. And she proved that when you walk out with your head high and a Rolls-Royce waiting, you're not just walking away. You're taking the wheel.